Hey, what's up guys? So, Phineas and Ferb, right? We all know who they are. Two kids that build something every day in their backyard. Their sister Candace tries to bust them to get the approval of her mom. Their secret agent pet Perry the Platypus tries to stop Dune Smirts from taking over Tri-State area. And then Deuce and Ayers wipes away their inventions, rinse and repeat. But, something that not a lot of people talk about are the Phineas and Ferb license games. Yeah, believe it or not, there's actually 5 of them. And I feel like most of them have been forgotten about, so I'm here today to change that. At least for the first 2 games. Those being Phineas and Ferb for the DS, and Phineas and Ferb Ride Again. Before we do that though, let's look at what these games even are in the first place, in case you've never played them. So yeah, these games are honestly the shit back in the day, man. Now, admittedly, I didn't even own the second one growing up, but I still have a lot of memories of the first one, and I play it all the time. You think I would have beaten this game with all the time I spent playing it, right? Nope, not even close, but we'll get to why later. Now to finally answer the question, what are these games exactly? And honestly, it's kinda hard to explain what genre they really fall into. The games are mainly 3D platformers, but there's also minigames mixed in between, a Pac-Man clone, a roller coaster minigame, a surfing minigame, a 2D platformer, a shooter, a DDR clone, and a turn-based RPG. Yeah, needless to say it's kinda confusing, but you start to get the hang of it when playing for a bit. So the first game was released on February 3rd, 2009 in the US, and March 27, 2009 in Europe, and was developed by the Japan-based studio Altron. In some of the dialogue for this game, you can kinda tell how it's made in Japan, since the localization is a little off. But nonetheless, I still think they did a good job of using their source material pretty well. There's also Ride Again, which was released only a year later, on September 14th, 2010 in the US, and April 1st, 2011 in Europe. Although the stories and locations in this game were more loosely based off the show, the localization is still honestly pretty good, so I wouldn't have been able to tell if this wasn't made in the US. I mean, hell, I didn't even know this game was made in Japan until I started making this game review. But basically what you do in these games is collect parts for your summer project while traversing various locations in the Phineas and Ferb universe. There's also minigames in between the platforming sections, where you have to repair a certain object to proceed, which is a pretty nice change of pace from the 3D platforming. To repair these objects in the first place, you need to collect screws, which are kinda pointless since there's an abundance of them, but we'll discuss that later as well. During all of this, there's also Candace who tries to look for suspicious things you're doing so that she can bust you, which is a pretty creative way to integrate her into the game, while staying true to the original show. To get Candace to bust you, there's a meter on the top screen, which just goes up from general falling in the first game, and falling from a high place in the second game. When it does fill up, that's when you get the Candace minigame, where you have to collect all the screws in the map, while trying to avoid getting caught by Candace. Then when you do get caught, you get busted, which really doesn't affect you much and just sends you back to the backyard. Then finally, when you collect all the parts, you get a minigame where you have to build the invention, and then you get to do whatever the invention does. In the first game, it's basically just roller coaster rides, and Ride Again, you get a random minigame, plus a mission with Perry. Again, all these little side modes are just nice little distractions from the main game, and the inclusion of them is very in line with the show as well, since there isn't a single plotline going on at once. Now, whether the game devs actually thought this in depth, or just wanted to milk the touchscreen gimmick for all it's worth, we'll never know. But in any case, that's the main gist of it. However, we still need to dive a bit deeper. We'll be explaining different aspects of both games in individual categories, and put them both head to head to see which one holds up more today. If you haven't been able to tell already, these games are pretty damn similar to each other, so I might have to get a bit nitpicky in order to give the edge to one of the games in a certain aspect. Since I grew up with the first game, I definitely have a nostalgia bias towards it, but I'll try my best to look at the game as objectively as possible. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so I was thinking of talking about the overall gameplay first, but we kinda just discussed it already. So let's look a bit closer at the minigames they have to offer, starting with the first game. So when you're exploring these levels, you'll often be stopped by a broken object of some sort, and you have to use the parts you've been collecting to repair them. This is where the first types of minigames come into play, and they offer a variety of different things that you need to build or repair in order to fix an object. Almost all of these use a touchscreen, or some other gimmick of the DS, and were obviously just used to pad out the game. It doesn't make the game less enjoyable though. It's comparable to something like, a sugar cookie. If you have a plain old sugar cookie without anything else of substance, it still tastes pretty decent when it's plain, and doesn't necessarily need anything else. But when you add some sprinkles onto it, it just makes it taste a slice bit better, and it doesn't detract from it by adding onto it. Now, if the cap on the sprinkle container were to come loose and the whole thing of sprinkles spilled onto it, the cookie would taste too sweet. So just adding a little instead makes it that much better. In case you haven't put the pieces together yet, sprinkling just a few minigames throughout the base game just adds to the experience rather than detracting from it. But if it took up half the game, then it would be a different story. Especially if these games just weren't fun, they would definitely weaken the experience, but I'd say they're decently enjoyable. Certainly not as fun as they were back then, since we've become so accustomed to touchscreen controls, but you know, still decent. My only gripe with them is that the minigames themselves usually don't fit with what you're doing, besides the building / repairing aspect. Like, you could be fixing a ladder, and in the minigame you'd be disassembling a bomb. Like, what kind of sense does that make? I mean, I get why they didn't handcraft each minigame to fit each structure, but I don't know, it just doesn't make it less annoying to me. Another minor complaint, slightly unrelated to the minigames themselves, is that the game has so many damn screws. Like, come on man, just screw off. I'm sorry, I'll see myself out. But seriously, you'll literally never run out of them when playing, so it kinda makes their existence pointless. I get that it would be annoying if they were harder to collect and you'd have to grind to collect them, but if they struck a nice middle ground, I think it would have just worked a little bit better. Moving on, we also have the Candace minigame, which I've pretty much already explained what it is. You have a meter that fills up the more time you spend falling in the overworld, and once filled up, you also get busted by Candace, also known as just getting chased around a maze. Yeah, this game is probably the least original out of the other ones we'll be looking at, because it's literally just a one-for-one Pac-Man clone, and an uninteresting one at that. Like honestly, it just seems to pull a Control-C, Control-V on the basic fundamentals of the game, but it also seems to lose the core focus of what made it good. Take for example how you collect screws in this game in order to not get busted by Candace. Clearly this is the replacement for the pellets which you get in Pac-Man, but think about the context of their existence in both of these games. In Pac-Man you're just a yellow circle thing who just wants to eat pellets cause he's hungry. Then in this game you're collecting screws, and once you do you don't get busted? Like, okay, sure, the story behind Pac-Man doesn't make all that much sense either, but at least it makes the littlest iota of sense, compared to this game which came out a whole 3 decades later, and has better graphics to tell a more in-depth story. Phew, okay, maybe I'm thinking way too deeply on a game made for kids, but still, take that away and it's still pretty bland and boring. The game isn't all too challenging either, since getting caught just brings you to an easier version of the stage, and getting caught again gives you an even easier stage. There's literally no consequence to getting caught these first 2 times either. You just get a lower rank at the end, and move on I guess. And if this didn't sound easy enough, you can also just hide in these bushes until they disappear. Plus you have these Jeremy dolls that can distract Candace for a bit. I will say that I do like how Candace has a minigame about busting her brothers, since it plays in line of the show, but the game itself is just uninspired and bland. Something that is pretty unique though is the roller coaster minigame. After you collect all the building parts in each world of the game, you get to use them to build some sort of ride that centers around the theme of the world you're in. Again, it's good that they're incorporating things from the show in a way that doesn't seem like it's a hindrance to the game itself, and having these things just makes it stand out from a lot of other games. So the main focus of this is the ride part, but of course before riding it, you need to build it. The minigames that play here are basically just like the ones we looked at before, and they're pretty easy. Once you're done with them, you also get to customize your vehicle, which doesn't affect gameplay much, but it's still a nice thing to have. And finally, there's the ride portion, and it's okay I guess. Essentially it's just an auto-scroller where you need to collect these stars in order to move on to the next world, and it's about as boring as that description sounds. It tries to be interesting by adding these turbo boosts, and also these paint cans that can obscure your view, which you need to wipe off. But these things don't really affect you much, and can be ignored altogether. Then there's this loop-de-loop at the end, which you're supposed to boost through to go into space, and sometimes you get this Dance Dance Revolution type minigame with Doofenshmirtz and Perry. Not much else to add on to there honestly. Besides the slow-paced nature of this game, the only main issue is the fact that you have to replay it quite a few times to get all the stars, which you need to get to continue. I do like how there's multiple routes in this game, so that you can get a different experience each time, but I think it would have just been a little bit better if it had extra stars in the course, so that you didn't have to restart if you just missed one. Overall, pretty unique, and a good way to transition between each world, but just about misses the bar in certain things, and brings it down a bit. Alright, so that about covers it for the minigames in the first game, but what about Ride Again? Don't worry, there's not much left to cover since these games are real similar to each other, which will be a common trend for the other categories we'll look at later. So yeah, the minigames in Ride Again are practically the same, except for a few things. The regular minigames are pretty much copied from the first game, but with a few improvements, and there's a couple new ones at play here as well. You got the spray paint minigame, a circuit minigame, and then you got this minigame which I still have no freaking clue how to do. Like, this isn't even a joke, I literally never learned how to do it to this day. Anyways, pretty standard stuff here, they didn't really need to fix anything honestly. Something that's been improved even more, however, is the Candace minigame. The way the meter works in this game makes a lot more sense, since it goes down whenever you fall from a high place, rather than every time you jump. In the minigame itself, the main difference is just the variety of maps. In each world, you get a different map rather than the grass one in the first game, and they provide a bit of challenge sometimes. Speaking of difficulty, you also never get easier variants to the stage, since the game just ends when you get caught. Now, granted, getting busted this time around doesn't affect you at all, since you aren't taken back to the backyard, but honestly it was a bit annoying in the first game, so I'll let it slide. I wish they would overhaul the entire minigame and just start from scratch, but considering the dev team were probably on a time crunch making this game, it's pretty passable. Lastly, you have the building minigame at the end of each world, which actually has been overhauled unlike the Candace one. Instead of making some sort of ride which would get repetitive after a while, you get to do something unique for each world. I won't cover each individual one for the sake of time, but just know that they're at least better than the ones in the first game. Another welcome addition are the parry missions you get after each minigame. Again, not much to discuss here, but I really like these a lot. They offer a lot of variety in the minigames you do, and incorporate parry in the story much better in the first game, which just use them in the final boss. Just gotta say that these are really well thought out, and they're even more fun than the inventions themselves. So after all that in-depth analysis, which game could possibly use the minigames better? It's Ride Again. Yeah, this shouldn't come off as too much of a surprise. Ride Again just takes what was in the first game and expands upon it. And although the first game laid the groundwork for this, the second game undoubtedly takes the cake here. It might be a bit unfair to compare it, since the first game did it, well, first. But when looking at it objectively, there isn't much of a choice. We've talked about the minigames now, but what about the main attraction of the game, the 3D platforming? Well, it's pretty good overall, honestly. The progression is very linear, so you'll always know what you need to do next. But this is a DS game we're talking about here. It's not like it needs to have a vast open world or anything. Let's look at the level design itself though, and see what game it holds up better in. For the first game, you'll be exploring different locations that are usually focused around the adventure you're building for each world, or more specifically, an episode of the actual show. You can see this in the cutscenes you get before each world, which play out exactly like the opening scenes of certain episodes, which is a pretty nice touch. You got the standard Danville level, which fits in well with the roller coaster since it spans across the city. The winter level that's inspired by the Swinter episode. The monster truck derby inspired by It's a Mud World. And lastly, the water park world inspired by... give me a second. I think it's this water slide they built in the Bustum episode. Let's just go with it. Besides the last one, I think overall these are pretty inspired level themes, and none of them come across as generic to me. Now on paper, some of them might seem generic since the first world is basically a grassland, and the second one a snow world, but it's far from the case. The first two levels essentially let you explore the neighborhood the show takes place in, and then the third level is probably the most interesting one in the whole game. It feels the most open out of all the other levels, and although it's pretty linear, it still strikes a perfect balance between the two styles. Even the fourth level continues the style while also switching to a whole new area, and you even get to access this level in other worlds of the game, which is pretty neat. I really wish the rest of the game was like this, but it's still cool the developers went all out in at least some of the aspects. The same can be said for the Snow World, as it has a lot more going for it than just being a generic snow world. The first level, sure, kinda generic, but then the second level has you going up ski lifts, the third one has you exploring a damn cave, and then you climb a mountain in the last one. I could go on talking about the other two worlds as well, but you get the idea. The simple concepts of each level are taken from a specific episode of the show, and are expanded upon beyond what the show could even accomplish. If these levels were in any other game, they might seem a bit jarring, which just shows how much care is put into them to get them to fit in the Phineas and Ferb universe. These are, without a doubt, the best parts of the game. So then, what about Ride Again? Well, essentially you're given more of the same, although the theming seems to be a bit more diverse. Unlike the first game, the theme seems to be a lot less focused on a specific episode of the show, and more often than not just takes certain elements from different episodes and crams them all together. The first world seems to follow the same elements as World 1 in the first game, and instead of a factory in level 3 and 4, you got a car wash. Admittedly, the car wash theme is more inspired off an actual episode than the construction setting was in the first game, but those levels are way different from the rest of the game in general, so it doesn't matter much anyway. World 2 takes a weird approach, as it starts out in regular old Danville once again. But then at the very last level, you go into outer space on Mitch's spaceship from the episode of Meep. It's a bit weird to save this for only the last level, but I guess having the whole world centered around Mitch's ship would get boring after a while. The levels before it aren't entirely generic though, as you actually get to play and jump and duck, which, in case you don't know, is the video game they went to in this one episode. Although this is cool to see, I still think they could have done a little bit more of the jump and duck theme they had, but it does the job, I guess. Moving on to the third world, it's probably the least interesting out of the bunch, like in the first game. It takes place in the wilderness that the grandparents in the show live in, and yeah, there's not much to talk about other than that. Then the fourth world is loosely based off the Stranded Island and Atlantis episode, and that's about it. There's a reason I didn't have much to talk about with this game's worlds. They just seem a bit unfocused and forgettable. The second world is probably the best one out of these, since its unfocused nature fits well with the themes it's using. But all these other worlds at their cores are just grass stages. Now sure, it's not as generic as it seems on paper, but they aren't that interesting either considering everything I've talked about. They had a lot of material to work with, but I just don't think they incorporated that well into each world. Oh yeah, also in each world there's a bonus game that uses the 2D style of the Jump and Duck section from the second world. I honestly kind of forgot about these when writing the script, so I don't have much to say about them. Cool addition, I guess, but they don't really add much to the experience and are kind of forgettable. So yeah, you probably know which one gets the point here, and it's the first game. It's actually pretty surprising considering Ride Again uses things from Season 2, which is arguably the more interesting season of the show. But cramming a bunch of ideas together just didn't click with me. Even the minigames that came after each world weren't based off the show whatsoever, not counting the parry minigames, which shows they are grasping at straws here. Like, okay, half of the minigames in the first game also weren't based directly off something in the show, but in that game it was clear they were going for a common theme with the theme park ride gameplay, so it makes more sense. In the first game, they just took one theme directly from the show and ran with it, plain and simple. They didn't need to put a whole bunch of themes together just to make each level diverse and interesting, but instead they just expanded on the theme they were given. Pretty impressive they could pull this off when taking material from Season 1, since it was the worst season. Oh, did I just say that? Let's get the obvious out of the way first, and that is the DS itself. Back in the early 2000s, the system seemed to look and sound a lot better back then, especially for a handheld, but nowadays you can clearly see the limitations shine through. Obviously there's a low resolution and these weird looking models in the game, for lack of a better term, but look past that and you're left with the sounds. And with that limitation also comes a limited sound font. In literally every single song for this game, you'll hear this chiptune sounding trumpet used as the backbone for each track, which as you can imagine can get pretty annoying after a while. If you've been listening closely to the songs playing in the background, you probably get the idea of what I mean. But it's not as big of a detriment as you might initially think. There's not much to say other than the songs themselves just being really catchy, and I think they could be held to just about the same quality as the show itself in terms of sheer catchiness. If you don't believe me, just listen to this Candace theme from the first game. Oh yeah, and the sound effects are pretty alright too, I guess. So what sets these two games apart in the sound department? Well, not much really. When looking through the background music in the options menu, you'll see that there's 54 tracks in the first game and 75 in the second. But some are unused, so let's just say there's about 40 in the first game and 50 in the second. Like I said, these are all just pretty catchy songs. Like, there isn't a single bad or downright annoying track that I can think of. I'm just gonna get right into it though. The first game is just the slightest bit better. So look, I tried really hard not to have a nostalgia bias when looking at this game, and I'm really trying to look at it as objectively as possible. But I'm sorry, these songs are just way more catchy to me than Ride Again. Technically this could go either way depending on preference, but I'll try to explain why the first game has better music, even though music is subjective at the end of the day. A good example of this is the track from 1-4. Now, I'm no music expert, but the song seems to have multiple different levels to it, and quite honestly gives me chills the longer the song plays. It starts out simple enough. You have another rock type song with a catchy melody, pretty standard for this game. Even though the song is still a rock song throughout the entirety of the track as expected, the song begins to escalate and give off a more uplifting mood. Then it smoothly transitions to the end where it drags out its notes, giving it a slightly sadder mood. This could be pure nostalgia talking, but to me the song just seems to tell a story as it plays. It's just really hard to explain. Really, I have no idea why I still get chills when listening to it, but I just do. Again, I'm no music expert, but I bet Sideways could make a half-hour in-depth analysis on why a song is just so damn good. And okay, I've been avoiding literally every other song up to this point, so let's talk about those. So one argument someone can make is that World 2 uses the same song throughout each level, but just speeds it up throughout each one, and the same thing with World 3. I don't know how else to really confront this other than saying that the bass songs in the first game are just a lot more catchy to me. The songs in this game are slightly more lengthy than the second game, and it gives each song more room to grow throughout its length in my opinion. Another argument for the second game songs might be how the songs take some leitmotifs from the show, like the Car Wash, Agent Pete, and Quirky Worky theme. Admittedly, yeah, these are pretty cool references to the show, but I do think they are the slightest bit lazy. I mean, something like the Agent P theme in World 2 is basically just a copy of Perry's theme from the show, but just in a different key. Overall, I did have to get a bit nitpicky here, since the soundtracks are very similar. Both games have really good sound design for a DS game in my opinion, but I just have to give the edge to the first game for being slightly better. Of course, like I said, music is always subjective, and perhaps I'm just biased towards the first game, but I just find the first game's tracks to be way more catchy. So far, I've only really talked about the good aspects of these games, but here's where it starts to get a bit rocky. I mean, seriously, before you even open up the game itself, the cover art for Ride Again doesn't include a shadow under Phineas' arm for the elbow pad. Like, come on, it looks like this cover was drawn by the animators of the show, so I don't even get how they screwed this up. Although, I guess Double Dash's cover also had a mistake with the backwards L on Luigi's cap, so it's really not that big of a deal. But back to the game itself, you can really tell these games had to be rushed out on store shelves to cash in on Phineas and Ferb at its peak popularity. I don't even know where to begin when talking about the glitches, honestly, but I guess the best place to show off how unpolished these games are is by looking at the Danville coaster in the first game. Right off the bat, the controls are just really stiff and slow. Like, I don't even know how you manage to make a roller coaster ride in a game boring. During the course, you'll be clipping into multiple objects, phasing through some stars, getting warps left and right, but the most jarring part is after getting launched into space. As I said before, you get this boring DDR minigame, which shouldn't even make any sense since Phineas and Ferb aren't allowed to see Agent P. But that isn't even the worst part. Once the game finishes, you fall back on the track, and then you get randomly warped back towards the beginning of the track. I mean, come on dude, who even tested out this course? Even on my second playthrough, the whole background just randomly decided to shift here for no reason. It's so bizarre since in the credits of the game, half of the people are listed as quality assurance testers, and that's not even an over-exaggeration. At this point, I shouldn't even have to say more since this whole time I've been talking about one level, but it gets worse. Remember how in the beginning of the video I said I never even got close to beating this game as a kid? Believe it or not, it wasn't just because I was a stupid little kid with a short attention span. It's because it was literally impossible to beat. Yeah, so apparently there's a game-breaking bug in the game that happens sometimes where you can't collect the final part for the project, that being the soapbox racer. It's hard to find concrete evidence of it existing online, but there is this one forum post where it seems like other people have the same issue. The only response I can see here is that you should start a whole new game if you can't access it, and eventually I did do that years later when I rediscovered this game. In any case, it's still really dumb that this exists, and with all these quality assurance testers, they really should have found this bug on their own. In Ride Again, the glitches are more of the same, but just less drastic. Oftentimes your character will glitch out when walking into corners and stuff, like in the first game, and every other minor glitch that was present in that game pretty much seems to be here too. There's some pretty obvious glitches here as well, like how you can just walk through the door here, and also you can collect this part through the wall. None of these glitches really bring down the experience like in the first game though. However, there are some frame drops whenever you activate the new drill item, which can be a bit aggravating. But speaking of the drill, there's another aspect to the polish section I haven't even talked about yet, and that's the speedrun glitches. Now, this part might be a little bit unfair to judge on, but as a speedrunner myself, I just need to touch on it somehow. So in Ride Again, there's these glitches you can do called drill clips, and when you learn them, it really just makes the game 10 times more fun. Seriously, if you have this game, go boot up your DS right after this video, and watch the tutorial on drill clips, which I'll leave in the description. But yeah, this glitch basically lets you clip out of bounds practically everywhere, and it's really fun to mess around with. It might still be a glitch, but it's still a fun one nonetheless, so I gotta give credit where it's due here. The first game also has out of bounds clips, but they're hard to pull off and just aren't as sparse as in Ride Again. Not to mention how Ride Again has something called ground storage, which I can't really explain myself, but trust me, it's cool as hell. Yeah, overall both of these games are unpolished as even when not accounting for the glitches, but I gotta give the point to Ride Again here. It might have more glitches overall since the game was only developed in a span of a year, but considering how the first game has a glitch that breaks the entire game, I don't really have a choice but to choose Ride Again. Not to even mention how using the speedrun strats just makes the game so much more fun anyway, so Ride Again is the clear winner here in my opinion. I would have talked about the polish of the gameplay itself too, but as I said, these games are practically the exact same in that regard, so there wouldn't be much to talk about. Just know that Ride Again would have won in that aspect too anyway. So here's a deciding factor that people need to look at when reviewing these games, or really any games in general, and that of course is how fun the game is. From what you've probably been able to gather, I do think both of these games are decently fun, and even more so if you're a fan of the show. But which game is the most enjoyable out of the two? The first game has you exploring locations that are more in line with the show than the second game, and while traversing the world, you're also able to upgrade the gadgets that you collect along the way. I think this upgrade system just adds another level of engagement to the game, and seeing your character being able to run and jump better over time just shows how much you've grown throughout the game. The only problem is that you can only have 2 of these gadgets equipped at a time, which makes it a little bit irritating when you have to switch things out. To rectify this in the second game, you can now use all of the abilities you get at once, but now you can't upgrade your run and jump ability. But honestly, this isn't much of a problem, since the controls are still responsive without it, and being able to drill clip just makes up for it if I'm being honest. Having the minigames in addition, fun level designs, and banging soundtracks to accompany them, both games just offer really enjoyable experiences no matter what way you slice it. Now, without being around the bush any longer, which game do I think is more fun? Is it the first game, which I've grown up playing and think has a better level design? Or is it Ride Again, which has more overall polish and slightly better minigames? I'm gonna have to give the point to Ride Again. When speaking from a sheer gameplay standpoint, I'd just say Ride Again has the more polished experience, which is to be expected from a sequel. It was really hard to choose this game over the first, considering that it has more inspired level design and music, but I think the second one offers a better package despite that. It's pretty similar to comparing Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 for example. Most agree that Galaxy 1 has the more memorable level design and soundtrack, but Galaxy 2 has more fine-tuned gameplay and adds things that make it a worthy sequel. And some argue it's the better game overall. Really, both of these games could go either way, and I still think the first game is the more memorable experience, but when looking from an objective standpoint, it just seems like the second game is slightly better. Even if I do think Ride Again is objectively better, it's still just my opinion at the end of the day. So if you guys have played these games before, let me know which one you like better in the comments. I'm really interested to see what you guys think. Before you go, I just want to say thanks for making it to the end. I've been really wanting to make a scripted video like this for a while now, and I really hope I can release more projects like this in the future. I can't guarantee that I'll always be able to bring myself to do them, considering I procrastinate a lot and have school, but I can promise that at least at some point I'll make another video like this. Until then though, thanks for watching, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you later.